Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me. This is Sierra from Sierra T Designs, and today I have this, which I think is a very stunning card to share with you guys. So let's jump right in. So I already cut down a bunch of cardstock, so I'm just going to use my die to trim it out. This is a stitched rectangle die, and I'm just doing that so that the blending would look a little bit more natural, in my opinion. Like, you guys know that I like to cut down my cardstock as it is, so that's what I'm doing here. So I just ran it through my Gemini with my magic mat there, and then we're going to move on pretty much straight into blending. So I am going to mask off an area. I just have a piece of masking paper here that I'm going to use to mask off what I want the horizon line to be. As you saw in the beginning card there is a horizon line, and then I'm going to blend a sunset after we do the waters. So for the water, I have tumbled glass, I have Mermaid Lagoon and Chipped Sapphire Distress Oxide inks. And I always start with my lightest color and I blend it across the full piece of where I'm going to blend. And then I will bring in my other colors and kind of build upon that. I find that that's one of the easiest ways for me to get a smooth blend. It does take practice, as does everything, right? But I have found that the easiest way for me to get a really smooth blend is to blend on top of color, as opposed to blending the first color a little ways out and then the next color a little ways out and then the last color. I just find if I lay a wash of my color, then I find that the easiest way to do it. And you're going to see it here again as I do the sunset. I'll do squeezed lemonade across the whole panel, and it doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to cover up portions of it. But I find it easier if I have some color down to continue the blend. So for the sunset, or sunrise, however you want to look at this, I have squeezed lemonade, carved pumpkin, and barn door. And I'm kind of doing it a little bit different for this blend. So for this blend, I'm just kind of layering them on top of the other and in like layers. Whereas the water, I kind of blended the center portion to be the lightest and then had like the mid-tone around it and then the darkest tone around that, whereas this one's, they're like layers going up, if that makes sense. I'm not sure I'm explaining that well, but that's kind of what I was thinking here. It's two different types of blend, but same oxide ink, and the masking paper is just keeping me from blending onto the blue colors with the sunset stuff. So I did bring in a stencil as well. You're going to see it here, right here. This is the Tim Holtz Layering Rays stencil. And it's not going to be super obvious. And I didn't really want it to be. On the final card, you can see it if you're looking for it, but it is fairly subtle. And now that's kind of intentional. I wanted it to kind of look like it was just starting to peek out, so it wasn't very bright or bold. So the like, you're gonna barely see it, but you can in the actual card. I can see it pretty well, but I just wanted a little bit of something more in the background that was kind of subtle. I mean, really, the color is kind of your focal, and then you have this really cool birdhouse, but I just wanted a little bit extra in the background. So I did pull off my stencil there, and you can kind of see it, not super well, but it is there. And then I'm just going to bring up the masking paper, and then you get kind of the full horizon effect there. And because I can never leave well enough alone, I have to add, this is just some perfect pearls that I have mixed up in a mini mister bottle that I'm just going to splash onto the background to add a little bit of shimmer and shine in there. And there's no rhyme or reason to where it's going. I'm just doing it everywhere. It doesn't really mean anything. I kind of added it to everything on the background there. And then I have the dies from the Spellbinders Spellbinders Build a Summer Birdhouse. And I'm going to cut out, I think I cut out 3 sets of the 2 shells and 3 of the birds. I also cut out the little paddles, the little oars. I don't use them in this card, so then I just put them in the same pocket I keep the dies in. But I did cut them out. So you will see that I'm going to cut them out here a few times, but I didn't actually use them. And I did have to bring in my little pokey tool just to get that out. It's actually the retractable craft pick, I think it's called, but I always call it the pokey tool. And I am later going to cut out that lighthouse again in some fun cardstock. I'm not going to show it to you here because that wasn't the route I was going when I first started this. Originally, I thought that my lighthouse would be white because I thought the white would look really nice on the background. But I changed my mind about halfway through, and then we go for more of a wood look. So I've got some Copic markers here. I chose to Copic color my images. So I have E43 and E44. That's what I'm using on the little post that's going to hold up the lighthouse. And I do also bring in a little bit E47 because I wanted the color to be a little bit darker. So I am going to bring in another brown in a little bit. Well, it's an earth tone for your Copic markers, but it's a brown. And then you're going to see me play with the layout several times because I wasn't totally sure what I was doing. I don't use a lot of dyes. That's not generally what I do for my cards, but I fell in love with these birdhouses by Vicky Papineau, and I had to use them, even though I only have I think the summer, the fall, and the spring set. I couldn't get my hands on the birds, and I couldn't get my hands on the winter set and other things. So, but I really, really wanted to use this one, and I think because it had the seagulls or whatever those little birds are, I thought that they would work as my birds instead of having one of the kind of birds that she has from the die set, because I haven't managed to get it yet. I will get it. I just haven't gotten there yet. And to add a little bit of shadowing to my birds, I brought in an N1 Copic marker, which is just a very pale neutral gray. And that's just to add a little shadow. Honestly, you can't really tell when it goes on the card, but you can tell later. So here you'll see that there's some kind of gray on the door and the posts kind of holding up the top. I originally was going to color them gray and then leave this white, and I didn't like how it looked with the background. So I opted to make it look more like a old wood birdhouse, if that makes sense, as opposed to a more traditional white lighthouse kind of thing. So these are the same browns that I used on the post there, the E43 and E44, and this is where I will bring in the E47 as well. And you did see earlier that I took the darker color and kind of drew in some wood lines. I followed on the post, I followed the lines that were embossed into the wood, or into the post, into the dies. And then I also just kind of added a little bit of swirling on it too, just to kind of give you more of a look of wood. And here I'm just trying to add some depth and dimension to the lighthouse, just to make it more look like it's wood as opposed to just a brown lighthouse. I think it comes out well in the end, especially after I cut out another lighthouse to add some like fun colored paper on top. I'll show you, you'll see that here in a little bit because I kind of changed it. Here it is right here. This is, I believe, the Steel Diamonds paper by Tonic. I don't think you can get it anymore, but any paper you have in your stash that has some texture to it, I think would have been amazing here. This is just one I happen to own, so that's what I went with. So I am going to cut the lighthouse out in that cardstock as well, and then I'm just going to trim the door and the posts that kind of hold up the roof out of this one and use that on the die cut to add a little extra texture, as I think that this looks really neat. And I just took my mini snips. This was super easy to trim out. And this is just an extra step because I have the cardstock. You can absolutely color it a different color and add something a little different to your lighthouse. This I just thought would add some texture to it as well because it's quite smooth, if that makes sense. The card, like the die cuts, don't have much texture to them. When I've colored them, you can't really see it. Whereas when you add like extra cardstocks and stuff, they end up with more dimension and more texture. So that's kind of something I really wanted to add to this card because I think in the end it turned out really great. So I just have my little bottle of Berry Art glue there, and I've been loving this for this the precision tip that it has. I think that it's so easy to use on these smaller die cuts and smaller things that you're trying to use. You'll see me use it again here when I add some shells at the end of after we've kind of stuck everything down, but I'm really enjoying this Berry Art glue. It's newer to me, but I've kind of started to love it, so I've been using it on everything. I still love my Nuvo Deluxe, don't get me wrong, but this is kind of just what I've been using lately. And I did bring in a stamp set also from the Finnabair Don't Forget to Fly stamp set. Everything I use is linked and listed down below if you ever have any questions as well, or you want to know exactly what I've used. It's always linked down there. They are affiliate links, just so you guys know. But I greatly appreciate you using them anytime you go to purchase anything. That makes it a little bit easier for me to continue to do videos instead of purchasing all this stuff mainly on my dollar. But But yeah, so I brought in that stamp set, and it says "Don't forget to fly," which I thought was pretty awesome. Nothing is glued down at this point. I just was using it for placement of my sentiment, and I am going to white heat emboss the sentiment because I think it ties well with the fact that I'm going to mat this on a white card base. So I just sprinkled on some alabaster white embossing powder, and then I'm going to heat set it. And it's not perfect, but honestly, I kind of like it. I kind of like that it's a little bit, I don't think it's crooked, to be honest with you. I think it's straight, but it's just a little bit thicker than it needs to be. I think I pushed down a little bit too hard on the door, so it kind of spayed my letters out a little bit. But I like it. I think that it just adds a little more personality to the card. But I really enjoy imperfections in my cards as a general rule. I think that it's really difficult to strive for perfection because I can't meet that. So I just try really hard to make something that I think looks beautiful and I really enjoy. So that's kind of my aim. And then I hope that you guys enjoy them too. Like that's the whole purpose here, is just sharing my passion of creating cards with you guys and using these different products and just kind of having a really fun time making things. So I did add some thin 3D foam squares behind the lighthouse, just to again add a little bit of dimension to it. Not a lot, because I like to mail my cards out, but enough that it kind of adds a little bit to the background. And then I'm going to just adhere down my 3 little birds, whatever they are, seagulls or whatever they are, doves maybe. And I just adhered those down, kind of flying into the panel, because that kind of, again, lets you think that there's things outside of it. And I wanted to add these little shells, because I cut them. I really wanted to use the shells, but I couldn't quite figure out how. So in the end, I just adhered them down to my lighthouse as, like, embellishments. And I am going to bring in a purple Copic marker just to add a little bit of shading to them. If you guys know, yellow and purple are complementary colors, and I thought that it's just a small amount of purple on these shells just added a little bit more color that complemented the sunset in the background, or sunrise, however you want to look at it. But I thought that kind of really just complemented it. So I've got a V04 Copic marker here, and I just added a little bit of flicks in the center of the shells to add a little bit of depth, and then to tone them down a little bit, I also brought in my N1 Copic marker and just went back over the purple just to tone it down a little bit, just with a little bit of neutral gray. And then, because I have to add gems to everything, I brought in some Studio Katia, I believe these are Icy Sparkle gems, and just put them in the center of the 2 kind of star-like seashells and 1 on the top of the lighthouse, because I think that looks cool. And then we're going to adhere it to the panel. So I do have a couple of things going outside of my panel, but I left them. They're still within the card base because I left room for like a border around it. So it goes outside of the card panel, but it stays within the card base. So it just kind of adds a little bit of extra, I don't know, like it just kind of makes the scene look like it's going outside of the card, if that makes sense. Like it's not stuck in this panel. There's lots of things going on outside of the panel. I just think that's really cool. And at this point, I forgot that I didn't add any white gel highlights, which I think really ties everything together. I think it adds so much more depth to an image. I don't know why I think that, but that's kind of just, it always does that for me. So once I realized everything was adhered down, I had to add some gel highlights. So I just brought in my Jelly Roll pen and just added a few highlights here and there. There's no real rhyme or reason, to be honest with you. I wanted a little bit of highlighting, so I added it in, added a few dots, and that's kind of it. So I'm going to hold it up here so you guys can check it out, and I'd love to know what you think. Consider leaving me a like, leaving me a comment so I can hear what your thoughts are, and consider subscribing if you haven't already. I do a new video every Monday, and then I join in on fun hops and other things whenever I can. Thank you so much, guys, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye for now.